I'm so sorry. We're live. Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry, I didn't mean to hit live just yet, but that's okay. Austin's gonna fix our camera for us. Yep, that's perfect. Yeah, if you want to come take a look.
Perfect.
Oh, maybe it's a little crooked. How's that look?
Oh, yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Sweet.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going? We switched sides today.
Right? A little different.
Kind of fun.
Yeah.
I got pulled up on my phone. Yeah, we're just a little behind. But that's okay because no one's here yet. Maybe just like no, other way. No, the other way. But hope you guys are all enjoying the season. It's kind of almost over as we get people in here. So yeah, that looks good. I think that looks
awesome.
Great. So we've got kind of a unique episode because it's not necessarily like skis or snowboards or bindings, but the stuff that we all have in common, which is accessories.
Yeah.
And like the little things that help us get to where we need to go. But before we get into that, Austin has some pretty cool news that happened to him. So I'm going to let him take it away and tell us his cool story.
Yeah, guys. So super cool. This last week, really, actually, I should say yesterday, I had the availability, experience, option to be able to go do some heli skiing here in Utah. And it was awesome. So big shout out to Powderbird of Utah up there at Snowbird Ski Resort. They took us up. I had a dope ski guide, Rob Hess. He was awesome. Took us up in the helicopter. We were able to run up there about 6 different runs from top to bottom, which was dope.
Heck yeah.
And we got to go ski like the northern side of Utah. And if you guys haven't skied up there, it's pretty awesome.
So I asked you this when we were getting set up, but the snow, really, how deep was it?
Yeah.
Right, because it's all untouched up there, right?
Yes, all untouched. So, and when I say northern part, it's like we're talking like more northern Salt Lake, I guess. So, because Salt Lake really is northern Utah,
right?
Right. So, if you're not familiar with this area, but we were up kind of just past like Bountiful area in Salt Lake, up past like City Creek Canyon and Immigration Canyon, and the snow up there right now. I mean, depths are like similar to the ski resorts, which I think was about 120 inches, right?
Okay.
As far as like powder, because when you're skiing backcountry, it's similar to the resort, but except for in the resort, oftentimes snow is like packed down and then people ski on top and it packs. The snowpack in the backcountry doesn't get packed down as much, but it does like a natural compaction, right? So what happens is it snows and the snow will freeze and you get snow on top and it'll melt and it'll kind of like get a little bit stronger and compact and then you'll get another one. And occasionally you'll get a snowing that'll come down where it might stay kind of crystallized on top and it'll be very light, dusty snow.
Yeah.
And then another heavy snow on top, which is then where you get avalanche danger, right? So then you start getting slides and different things like that. So we had to be very careful about avalanche control as we're in kind of a moderate condition right now. And actually today and tomorrow, probably higher avalanche danger.
Because it's so warm.
With the temps we're getting. Yeah. So, but I would say we had, I mean, while skiing, easily 12 inches of powder.
Amazing.
Man. I mean, you're just taking full powder turns, just going wide. You could even just lay into them a little bit and just pop, and you're just having snow just hitting you in the face.
Awesome.
So fun.
Yeah.
So cool.
The thing that I love about that idea the most, because I've never gone heli skiing, but the idea that you could just like get perched on top of a bowl and know for a fact that it's like you and maybe 4 other guys, and you can all kind of spread out on top of the bowl and do your thing. You don't have to worry about some Joe Schmo hitting you from behind or someone eating it in front of you, right? Like that's really cool. That's sweet.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, if you get a chance to go, it is an expensive, ticket. I think it's about $2,500 a person. So it takes some saving to get up there, or unless you got that money.
Been good for you.
Yeah, but it is worth it, man. If you get the chance to go, highly recommended to be an advanced skier. When you get people up there that are intermediate or just not confident in deep powder, it tends to cause issues just because it's not easy to get back to base. You
Right.
know, you got to load up in the helicopter and fly you out of there. So be a confident, advanced skier, ready to go. But if you get that opportunity, man, take it because there's nothing like being in a helicopter when it takes off and starts flying you over a peak and you're just looking, you're like, oh man, look at all this untouched
That's so
snow.
sick. Yeah.
The helicopter starts banking left and your whole body's moving, feeling the G forces of it too. It's cool.
That's awesome.
For a second, you want to be like, man, I feel like I'm in Call of Duty or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's super fun.
Or I think of like Survivor when they like win a reward and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna ride a helicopter over to this island," and they're always like, "This is so sick."
It's exactly like that, but when they drop you off, you get to ski down.
Amazing.
So
Sign
even
me
better,
up.
right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, super cool. So,
Sick.
yeah, Trent and I, we might stay tuned. You know, if we can get enough viewers to start watching, maybe we can make a little book a little trip together or something.
Yeah,
It'd be cool.
that'd be way sick.
And we'll post. I should have a video coming out about with some of our runs because we had some GoPros going.
Oh, sick,
Yeah,
dude.
so I'll try and put together a little edit so we could post here for anyone that's interested in seeing.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
yeah,
Heck
cool.
yeah. All right. Well, like we said, we're gonna now dive into some accessories, right?
Yeah.
The things we all have in common.
Yes. And they make a big difference.
Right. I was just about to say, I feel like sometimes people don't put enough stock in their like goggles and helmets.
Yeah.
And then they end up having a terrible time, right?
Absolutely.
Because they can't see or whatever. I feel like seeing is the biggest thing. Or they're cold, right?
Right.
So we're gonna go over like some little things that like little tips that we found that help us with either fogging our goggles or making sure we're comfortable, and then as well as like more standard stuff, right? That everyone's got. So let's do this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, we're going to focus a lot. We're going to be talking about goggles, helmets, but we're also going to talk about neck gaiters today. We'll talk a little bit about your gloves and like any other accessories. If you guys got questions on something in particular, I'm happy to talk about things like ski poles. There's not much to go on in that realm, but like, we've also got socks that we can talk about. We've got jackets and pants, which we typically do in another session.
Yeah.
But happy to talk if you're wondering about clothing in general. Throw a comment in and we'll help answer that for you.
Yeah. Our biggest points are probably going to be goggles and helmets today, but like Austin said, any questions, they're more than welcome. Bring them on.
Yeah.
So okay,
absolutely.
Sick. Let's dive in.
Yeah. So let's do this. We're gonna start. Typically, it's funny because when I get ready for the resort, I always go like foot to head.
Yep.
We're gonna go opposite today. Let's go head to toe.
Okay.
Right. Talking about accessories that you're gonna use. And maybe even we can throw out later, like we said, some of those small things or even accessories for the boards and skis that you might want.
Yeah, like stomp pad.
Yeah, stomp pads, what little to-go waxes.
Yeah.
You know. So
sweet. Well, if that's the case, let's start with helmets.
Yeah.
How approach this like you're buying a new helmet? How would you approach buying a brand
new helmet?
Yes.
New.
It's key.
Strongly. Obviously, as like a 16-year-old kid growing up, I wasn't really too concerned with a new helmet. I just grabbed something from the little ski garage. It was like a rental helmet.
I didn't wear a helmet for the longest time.
Yeah. And it's not required. However, I will say, especially in today's world, 99% of the people out there are going to be wearing a helmet.
Yep.
Every one of my ski guides in our heli trip was wearing a helmet, right? I think there was only like one or two people in general that did not have a helmet. And it's really, there's a lot of reasoning for that. Right? Helmets provide safety, number one, which is very important, actually, when it comes to impacts that can cause concussions or other serious injuries.
Right.
I've had it help me when I hit a tree. Honestly, that probably saved me in a good amount of pain.
Yeah.
You know,
I've deflected so many branches with my helmet.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then second is they bring a lot of warmth, right? So
Yeah.
warmth and comfort, especially on a really cold day. And then third, I mean, I don't know, looks, accessibility for like music and stuff like that.
Right.
There's just kind of like the other features,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
So, but first and foremost, to answer your question, Trent, what am I going to do when I'm buying a new helmet? First thing I'm going to look for is fit,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So, we've got 3 different options here behind us as far as helmets go. Actually, funny enough, first one I've got is the helmet. This is my helmet, right? Which is a Solomon. I think they call it, yeah, the QST Charge helmet. Solomon came out with this a few years ago. And honestly, it's just a very simple helmet. It's got the venting side, so you get a few options as far as dual venting. And then what I look for is, so like I said, first is fit. Now, almost all helmets nowadays are going to come with this adjustable BOA system. There's a few that don't. We have one here called one of Smith's Holt helmets,
Mhm.
which is a manual adjustment. It's like an old school bike helmet where on the inside you got to pop out the straps and move them and pop them back in. I'd spend the money on a BOA. It's not much more. Unless there's a very specific reason or it just fits perfectly as is, then you can grab that Holt.
I know that some people with the Holt, and a lot of park riders love them because they can be big enough that you can put a beanie underneath it.
Right.
They like that look. But to Austin's point, one thing I want to talk about is, the fit's really important, but when it comes to price, really you're starting off with like your standard, like this is going to protect you and it doesn't have any bells and whistles or anything. And then as you move up in price, you start getting more bells and whistles, right?
Right.
The adjusted BOA. Sometimes there's multiple plastic areas in order for you to, get better impact resistance, right? It doesn't
Right.
destroy the whole helmet. And then you get into, lots of vents and adjustable vents. But yeah, that's kind of, as you move up in price, that's what you're going to be gaining or losing.
Right. Right. So Trent, how would you describe first then? So as we're talking about fit, how should a helmet fit for the viewers that don't know or are interested?
Yeah.
And I'll demo with my helmet here.
Yes, please do. So one thing that I always like to do is you have them put their helmet on, right? And then they're like, "How's this fit?" You have them go like this, and if their helmet is moving independently from their head, it's too big, right?
Right.
Another way that I test this out, especially with kids, is I put my hand on top, and then if I can move their head and the helmet together, it's a good fit. And then really like the BOAs are going to be your slide adjustments. On really cold days I put a hood under my helmet, so then the slide adjustment is can accommodate for that.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I do. So really just
Nice and
making sure
muffled.
it's making sure it's comfortable.
Right. Yes, I love that. All of the tip for those that have kids, because obviously kids, it's hard to tell sometimes
Mhm.
as far as like they aren't gonna know how something should fit, right?
Right.
I will say, especially with kids, you will notice when they're ready to go from a kid to an adult helmet because kid helmets are very small in comparison. And usually, if you could fit like a finger inside or two between the helmet and the head, it's too big.
Yeah.
I would never buy big on a helmet.
Mm-mm.
Get your kid the size they need because we're talking about safety,
Right.
right?
100%.
And that's important.
And really, if you're really concerned, just get one that has more adjustments
Yeah.
than the others, right? Yeah.
They have different ranges. What I, as an adult rider, buying a helmet like this for me is the moment I put it on, it fits. Like when I say comfortably, it's not too snug. It's not squeezing on the
Mm-hmm.
where I might get like a headache or something from wearing it too much. It has just enough space that if I wanted, I could slide like a neck gaiter underneath to hold my neck gaiter up. And then the back adjustment is really just to kind of fine tune and get it so that I can tighten the back and the front tight enough that when I move the helmet up and down, like I do with my hat here, it pulls the skin of my forehead,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if it's moving, you'll notice if a helmet is too big, and I'm
Mine's
gonna
an
go
extra
with,
large if you want to.
yeah, we'll go with Trent's because he's got a big
I
head.
do have a big head.
He's got those brains,
It fits my ego.
right?
Just kidding.
You can definitely tell
Right.
as I
It's
shake
got
my
movement.
head, right? The helmet can go very far back before falling off very far forward. Way too big,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. So tell us about MIPS.
Yeah. Yes. So
That's
yeah,
another big feature that, is really important when it comes to helmets. So
right.
let's talk about it.
Right. So we covered safety. Really,
Yep.
fit and is the most important part of safety. Right, is a proper fitting helmet. So next are like the extra features, and along the safety lines, we have something called MIPS, spelled MIPS. Usually has a small yellow sticker located somewhere on the back of the helmet or on a tag. Right, and MIPS is it actually has another word in there. It's a multi impact protection system.
Yep.
Right? There's another word. I think it's a D somewhere in there. And the idea behind it is actually supposed to be multi-directional, I believe,
Yeah.
impact protection system. It's not supposed to keep the helmet from being able to say, okay, you can take multiple impacts on it. The idea is that it can spread impact over the entire size of the helmet.
Right.
Right. So a lot of people mix that up because when you take an impact on your helmet, especially if it's a serious impact, you should replace that helmet.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
It is the recommendation. If you took a small impact, it's on your judgment. However, just to keep us safe liably, I would say replace the helmet. Right. When taking impacts, be very cautious on that end.
So I used to think that the MIPS was, if you look, it's green right here. This is almost like a honeycomb shape. That is not MIPS.
No.
It's just the design of the helmet.
That's aerocoroid.
Yeah. What MIPS is actually there's this yellow liner in here. I kind of pulled it away. And what that does when you make the crash is it will shift inside your helmet to divert more of that impact away from the initial point of impact. And once again, it's just going to allow that it's not just one big hit all in one spot, where you're diverting some of that impact in order to negate some of the concussion possibilities.
Right. Exactly. It's kind of fun to look at and interesting because the MIPS system is now being implemented all across the sporting industry. So we saw it pretty early on in ski helmets, but it was being implemented in NCAA football. I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard official announcement, but I would say it's probably an NFL.
Right.
But it is one of the biggest protectors against concussions.
Yep.
Right. When a concussion occurs, it's usually generated from a direct impact to one point of the head that causes the brain to actually move, and there's a kind of a sac inside your head. It's weird to talk about, but that membrane moves and everything moves to one side and it hits the skull barrier, and that's what causes the so-called concussion. Right. And when you're able to disperse that impact over the area of the helmet, what happens is instead of taking one big dent and only having this small portion of the helmet able to protect you from that impact, now the entire surface area can take that impact, right?
Yeah.
So if you have the foam, what happens is that all that foam disperses energy. If you have this aerocoroid that you'll see in a helmet like Trent's, I believe this one is part foam, part coroid. But what happens is in one of those, it acts like a lot of mini straws. And when you take a straw, not like a big one, but say you cut it down to about this size, you push it together, that straw crunches.
Yeah.
Right. And that crunch disperses energy and releases it before it goes to your head.
Yeah.
Right.
So bottom line is, if you're going to buy a helmet, start with fit.
Yes.
Then I strongly suggest MIPS.
Yep. Safety features.
And then after that, really, it's just what your preference are for bells and whistles.
Yeah. If you do have the option for MIPS, it's like $20 or $30 more.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like plastic and rubber bands.
Right.
But it's worth it. It's not that much money when you're talking about the duration of your helmet.
Yeah.
Right. So I like that, and then really when you're getting in more price is usually just lightweight, a little more advanced tech. Sometimes I will say you'll notice there's a different style of making helmets. And this is where we could get really deep. If you wanted to talk deep stuff on manufacturing, we'll save you for most of it.
Yeah.
Right. But helmets do have multi-construction capabilities. So if you look at something like the Holt, you'll find it cheaper at the stores because it comes in one solid mold. There's no assembly required per se besides the inner structure of the helmet. They can actually mold all this plastic in one go. While with a helmet like Trent's here, or my own is this one's a 2-piece. I don't know if yours is 2 or 3. I think it's a 2.
2.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
right. And so basically they have to create separate pieces that they mold and then assemble together. And that causes a little bit more in price, as well as just the ability to market it when you add more venting systems, a brow visor on it, you know.
Which for me, game changing.
Yeah.
I love having a visor.
For me, it really just helps match up the vent system on my goggles.
Yeah.
But
So that's a pretty good segue. So let's say I've got my Smith goggles.
yeah,
And I go in and I want to buy a new helmet. Where would you point me to?
in general, if I was working in a shop, an easy sale is to point you to Smith.
Yep.
Could you use any other helmet? Absolutely.
Right.
However, Smith goggles and Smith helmets are designed to match.
Yep.
Right. Especially when you're talking matching the goggle to the line of the helmet so that you have no gap in between and allowing proper airflow.
Right. Exactly. And that's the point I was hoping you'd make, and you nailed it. So if you look here at my helmets, I've got it's got holes right here and right here, and those line up perfectly with the vents in my goggles, and that will just allow airflow so that they don't fog. Right?
Absolutely.
Which is key, right? Because you got to be able to see. So if you'll even grab my goggles,
yeah.
One thing I strongly recommend is if you love your goggles, then yeah, here are mine.
Keep them in a case.
Keep them in a case. If you love your goggles, though, and you want to buy a new helmet, take your goggles to the shop with you to try on the helmet, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's going to help you see how it fits, see how it feels, see how it lines up. You'll know if you like it or you don't, but that is huge, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you mentioned that, and then Trent's going to show you here how that fit looks. Now, I want to point out too as well. Now, when we talked about what would I recommend with Smith goggles and Smith helmet, like I said, the easy go-to for a shop is to say, go try on some Smith gear, right? It matches. It doesn't have to be that way. Myself, I use a Solomon helmet with Giro goggles.
How dare you?
Right? And they fit great. Right?
Yeah.
But I say that too because you have a lot of new goggle manufacturers nowadays online. A lot of people are purchasing goggles online. Something just to keep in mind is if you do have one of those, I would generally stick to a bigger brand as far as helmets like Smith or Giro. Solomon's great too, but generally these guys, they focus on helmet design and they tend to be more compatible among style of goggles.
Right. So if you think of like a Dragon or an Oakley, like Oakley makes helmets, they're just not huge, right?
Yeah.
But if you have one of those and you really love them, then Austin's saying steer more towards the bigger brands because they're probably going to be a better option. The other thing that I want to say is if you buy at a lot of shops, this is the case. If you buy a pair of goggles, you cannot return them. I don't know how online manufacturers do it, but when I was at a shop, we couldn't take back any goggles once you took them home because we don't know the damage from like any scratches that you may have given, right?
I would assume online is probably if the box is unopened or they may check and just make sure that there's no scratching.
Yeah.
It's a harder game.
Be careful. Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. And then the other thing is if you don't love your goggles and you're like, well, I was going to get a new pair of goggles anyways, you might consider buying goggles and helmet at the same time.
Better deals.
Yeah, but you could probably get a better deal, and then you can try them on together in the shop. To give you like a reference, here's what mine looks like together, right? They just fit real snug, real seamless. When my face is in there, it doesn't have this weird gap, right? So, but yeah. So just keep in mind that you don't want like a huge gap between your goggles and your helmet. They're called Gorby gaps. You'll get made fun of, if not to your face, behind your back. And you also get like a brain freeze. So
right. Yeah, there's a lot of names for them. You'll notice getting cold on the top of your forehead. It's not the end of the world, but it's just so much better to have them seamlessly lined up.
Yeah.
To avoid that, again, I'll make another recommendation here too, which is you're going to find this more common with women's goggles. There are some that like Smith's makes, a women's Virtue goggle is the name of it. And it's a smaller size with a smaller profile. And something like that, you might want to be a little more cautious. Or sometimes there's certain fits of goggles that just tend to be a little more narrow. You see it a lot with like kid goggles too, and like a kid might have a narrow face but like a big head, like big
Yeah.
forehead, and so it's kind of hard to avoid, you know. But just with that is where you're going to notice. Definitely go try on your helmet and goggle. Honestly, I would even like. I honestly, I don't think shops would even care if you're going to buy online, and you're saying, "Hey, I'm planning on buying online," but just go try on what they have in stock.
Yeah.
Most shops will match the online price, so they'll
Mhm.
price match for you, or they may have a better deal.
Right.
So, like we were saying, they might give you a discount if you're buying helmet and goggle, or and they can help you. They're not going to be mad for that kind of shopping because in this day and age, everyone's used to it.
Yeah. So let's dive a little bit more into goggles and specific to
Yes, I
goggles.
think we covered most of helmets here.
Yeah,
So
I think so. One thing I wanted to talk about is when you're buying goggles, you'll notice that some say like OTG on them or like Asian fit on them. And Asian fit is simply just they sit flatter on a person's face, and then OTG is over the glasses. But there are some manufacturers like what are yours?
Jiro.
Juro. Aren't Juros all of them are like OTG classified,
Yep.
right? Even if they don't say it.
Almost all Jiros are OTG over the glass fit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is
Compatible.
Yeah, which is pretty cool if you want to wear your glasses while you're skiing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. A big part of that, actually quite interesting, is the foam design on the goggle. So Giro tends to use a bit thicker frame with an interior venting system to allow more room for glasses on most of their goggles, and then um, the Asian fit is usually actually a little more foam on the inside of the nose bridge of the
yeah,
goggles, which allows it in case. I mean, I think the idea is usually the ridge of the nose is a little bit different in some Eastern ethnicities, and so it can help the fit so that you don't have airflow flowing up
exactly.
through.
Because
Right?
that can be uncomfortable, it can cause fogging, different
Yes,
issues.
it's
So,
not just for someone who's Asian. It is for anyone who wants that, but
yeah, it
it's kind
is
of how they gear it.
called the
It's
Asian fit.
called
Yeah.
Asian fit, which
Yeah.
is so.
Um, so then some other features are you have like chromopop lenses, or everyone has what they call like so Smith says chromopop. What's
Yeah.
Giro's?
Why don't you grab my goggles there?
Yeah,
We'll throw a few of these up here
we'll
for you
show you.
guys.
So they all use these terms, but they're all kind of the same thing, and it's how the goggle uses the light to pull out features in the snow. So, do you remember what Giro's is called? Like
Yep.
the tech?
So Giro uses a vivid lens
Vivid.
by Zeiss lenses.
Yes.
All right. So now, like Trent is saying, so goggles, they come in all shapes and sizes,
Yes, they
right?
do.
There are so many options out there. You don't have to stick to just the name brands. You can buy stuff on Amazon. We will talk a little bit about the benefits and perks of what the major brands are offering.
Mhm.
But you'll notice a lot of your lower end goggles, something that isn't as expensive, aren't going to have these special terms as far as color enhancement, right?
Yes, that's the
Or
word.
sight, and yeah,
Mhm.
right. So I do have a pair of Smith goggles here. This is like the first goggles that I bought and wore when I was a kid, right? They're these bright red goggles. Uh, they have the sunburst color to the lens, but they don't have the specific like chroma pop, which is that designated formulation to help colors stand out a little more vivid on the slopes,
Yeah.
right? So I like Giro's Vivid, is their lens technology. They all kind of do the same thing.
They're just called something different.
Yeah, I know when I was in the shops, I was a big fan of the Zeiss lenses. So Zeiss is another third-party company that designs the lenses for Giro. I think they also do for some of the other brands. I think Oakley
I
uses
think
Zeiss.
Oakley does use size too.
So there's a few different ones. And I like those because they also Zeiss will do like camera lenses and regular glasses and other things. So they're a trusted manufacturer. So I really liked that from theirs. I found that the color enhancement Vivid was very similar to Oakley's Prism lens,
Mhm.
which to me helped a little bit more with distortion. So it focused a little bit on like light and darks, not as much color, right? Which I found beneficial. Um, when you're comparing Smith to Giro, like if you could tell the difference, I'm very impressed.
Yeah, me too.
You
Like,
know, you might have a small difference, but it's hard to say that that's really from like the chroma pop, or is that just from like the lens color that you have?
right, exactly.
You know, because that's really what's going to make the bigger difference as far as color you see.
Yeah. So let's talk cylindrical versus spherical
Yeah,
lenses.
yeah. Let's start at the basics, right?
Yes. So if you look, yours is technically cylindrical, is that right?
Yeah, both of these two are going to be cylindrical lenses.
Yeah. So if you look, if you imagine a cylinder, right? It has a curve to it, okay, and that's a cylindrical lens. And then if you look at a sphere, it's more of a bubble shape, right? And that's the difference between spherical and cylindrical. One, they say that like spherical brings in light the way your eye likes to see it, right? Because it's a sphere. And they say that these act more like sunglasses. Once again, if you can tell the difference, I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
But like most people aren't going to be able to.
An easy way to tell too, just from looking at these, if Trent, you hold yours up.
Yep.
When I move my goggles up and down, you see that vertical reflection. That's because of that cylindrical stamp. When they cut these out of plastic, they're cut out of a flat piece of plastic and then bent around, while Trent's are laser cut from a sphere, right? And so his, you'll see the reflection isn't vertical, it's more of like a mirrored image, right?
Yeah.
So the idea I've heard some people say is that you can get a little bit of what I'm trying to think of the word, but really distortion.
Right.
A little bit of distortion from a cylindrical lens. They're easier to manufacture, which is why they're less expensive.
Yep.
However, when most people talk about that distortion, it's the tops and the very bottoms of the goggle. And it's, if you looked for it, you would be able to see it. But from regular skiing, I've never had a problem. I actually prefer cylindrical for myself because it fits my face better.
Yeah, and I am in the same boat, but on the other side, right? I prefer spherical because it fits my face better.
Yeah.
And so that's something to keep in mind as you're trying goggles on.
Yeah.
And now we get into features like specifically lenses. So, you know, you have like a spectrum of light, right? So the more light that there is, obviously you'd want a darker lens, and then the less light there is, you'd want a lighter lens, so that you can see. And then some goggles have what's called photochromatic lenses, which they will change with the lighting that's out. And so that kind of gives you a bigger window of that light spectrum, and they usually try to hit it right in the middle, right? So on your brightest days, you may feel like it's a little too bright, and on your darkest stormy days, you may feel like it's a little dark, but everywhere else in between is dialed, right?
Right.
And then you have lenses like these, where this is actually my low light lens, because I went skiing during a storm and mine just magnetically take off, right? So I can easily just switch them in and out, which is awesome. There are some that aren't magnetic, but still can be switched out pretty simplistically.
Yeah.
But that's something that people are always interested in, is being able to switch in and out, depending on the conditions.
Right. I love that you bring that up. Let's see. I was there was something you had said there about I think it was just like the type of lenses that you were using there that I was going to comment on. Yeah, guys. So when we're talking about goggles, you were talking about the photochromatic, right?
Yes.
So there is a lot of info when it comes to goggles. So if you're finding any of this helpful, please drop a like on there. Throw us a comment or a question if you have any, because this is a very heavy knowledge topic that we could provide a lot of knowledge or a little.
Right. We're kind of giving the overview in this conversation right now, but yes, there's a lot.
Right. Photochromatic and light adjusting systems are kind of the way of the future. The only thing is right now the technology we have doesn't allow them to be as precise as what the benefit of using interchangeable lenses is.
Yeah. Right.
And so you all find more interchangeable lens options than you will like photochromatic or like auto adjusting functions. I love that you bring that up, because when we start talking goggles and you look at price, price usually starts low when you get a single lens with a cylindrical lens fit, right? Then that's funny, and I just noticed the interior lens on this is peeling apart.
Amazing.
These are pretty old. These are I got them when I was 15, right? So these
Nice.
are almost 14 years old.
Yeah.
So pretty old school. And then I've got these ones which I've used for the past honestly 6 or 7 years. So probably almost time for me to upgrade these as well. But I love them.
Yeah.
They're one of my favorite goggles. These are the I'm trying to remember the brand. I sold so many of them too.
Yeah.
Giro Axis, I believe, is what they were
Mm.
called. But what you start seeing is next in price is going to be adding multiple lenses.
Yep.
You'll find some that are simple, that are pop in, still pop out.
Like the Squad is
Yeah,
that way.
almost every goggle you can remove the lens. They're just some are designed to be easier to do than others.
Hmm.
Well, then you start moving in something like this. It's going to be this actually has a pop system on the sides and then two magnets in the middle. So on the sides here, you can kind of see there's little holes for it to pop in and out where it lines up. And so I can put it in and just pop each corner.
Nice.
Right? So quick and easy. From there, you move into spherical goggles, and you'll find a few spherical non-interchangeable, but most spherical, they start adding the separate second lens as an option as well, because they know that's what you're looking for.
Right.
So,
And one thing I'll speak to, Austin said like maybe it's time to upgrade his goggles. He loves them. If your frame is in good condition, but your lens itself has taken a beating, these big manufacturers, you can buy just the lens,
yeah,
right? Which is really cool. So if you have some big scratches and you're like, oh man, I could really just use a new pair of goggles, save yourself $120 and just buy the lens, right?
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
You'll notice the first thing to deteriorate when you like maybe the question would be posed, when do I know if I need new goggles, right? First things to deteriorate are going to be the inside foam, usually of the goggle, or
Yeah.
damage to the frame. These, why I love Giros, is really for their ventilation systems. Like Trent said, they're all OTG for over the glass fit. And a big part of that is I'll show you guys a little comparison here. And maybe Trent can bring his up
Yeah.
as well, so you can see the top end of the goggles. This top part on the left side here, it's almost the width of my finger, is the ventilation system.
Mhm.
While on this goggle here in red, it's this inner part of the foam right in between, and you can kind of see Trent's there as well. His is pretty
Mine's like
big
right
as well.
here where my middle finger is. It's like coated over by like a thin layer of foam.
Right.
But yeah, that's where the venting is.
So this one, why I love it is because of that thick ventilation system that is, as you can see, there's no variation. It's thick all the way across and has it down there at the bottom. And I have never had a problem
Yeah.
with fogging,
Yeah.
which is probably the number one complaint when it comes to goggles.
Yeah. And one thing that's huge, well, there's a couple things, but one thing I want to speak on is if you're like looking up ski goggles a lot and then you go on your Instagram, you'll be getting just bombarded with a variety of, more like niche, smaller brands of goggles. And some of them are really great, right? Like Dragon, I'd kind of put on the higher end of that.
Yeah.
There's a new one called Glade. My buddy got one, or my brother-in-law got a pair of Glades, and he really liked them. And then he crashed, and they've fogged ever since.
Really?
Yeah, and it's just because they got moisture in there, and so I don't know if their moisture wicking abilities is quite the same. I'm pretty sure he did wipe out his goggles, which is don't do that.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
I was gonna say, so maybe that's what we talked about. We've kind of talked about some features and general ideas of goggles. We've already hit really on fit, making sure that there's no gaps around the face and they fit comfortably. So let's talk a little bit about care.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to, like we said, fogging is the number one complaint with goggles. Number two is probably like fit,
Right.
which is usually just that you bought the wrong goggle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or maybe it's visibility or something. But fogging is the one I heard all the time in the shops. And there is a common myth that you can like reapply fogging solution. Let's talk a little bit about the technologies that help anti-fog,
Yeah.
about the recoating of it if you were to wipe it off, but also how should you keep your goggles from getting scratched from not fogging in the future, that kind of stuff.
Right.
How should we take care of them?
So when you're done skiing, let them dry out and then put them in a case. Right. That's gonna prevent scratches, whether minor or major, if you drop them. So I always put mine in the case. Usually they come with a case.
Yep.
And
Almost
then
always, or you could just go ask a shop if they have an extra bag,
and they probably
will.
do.
Yeah.
And then the coating on the inside is actually like a spray that they do. And if you crash and you get snow in there, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I can't see there's snow," and they'll just wipe it out, right? And that just cleans out all that coating. So what you want to do is try to like knock out as much snow as possible, and then if it's really bad, like go and dry it, like wait for it to dry in the lodge. Or I've skied with like little mountains of snow in my goggles.
Yeah, me too.
And then when I'm done, I just let them dry, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to remove that coating by wiping everything out, right? That moisture in there, it's going to make that coating really easy to pull. So you just don't want to touch the inside of your lenses.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Most lenses nowadays, I think Smith was a big designer of this, and I think Giro does some as well. Like that's something you'd have to look into to check if they do it or not. But a lot of them do when they cut out these lenses. Your lens is designed of two pieces. You have an outer lens and an inner lens, and then a space between, which is what the airflow also helps use to keep from fogging. And this was actually designed by the first owner of Smith goggles, who was a former aircraft pilot.
I didn't know
And
that.
yeah,
That's
and
sick.
that he mimicked the goggles based off of what they used in the military and for flying airplanes. And at high altitude, they couldn't have fogging. And one of the designs was using two lenses to allow for a brief period, an intermittent area
Like a
of
barrier.
air, to
Yeah.
help protect against fogging. And so that was the design. So usually the inner lens also has a little bit of ridging on the plastic that allows water to track and flow down from the goggle so that it doesn't bubble up or spread out. And so usually you'll notice if snow does get in, water will drip and flow down through it very easily. It has a little path for it. You can't really microscopic, you can't see it much. And so it's not something to worry too much about. However, you do need that anti-fog coating to help with the hot air.
Right.
So,
We are coming up on the 45 mark is right around the corner. So I think we've nailed helmets. We've nailed goggles. If you guys have any more questions, we'd love to answer them and talk more. Just leave a comment. But is there anything you want to speak to before we start wrapping things up?
I think let's hit a little bit on just some of these smaller accessories too. Like we said, we've hit the top two, the big
Yeah.
ones. So I'm gonna take a second and let's just speak maybe to gloves and socks. Those are nice accessories. And maybe some neck gaiters,
Yeah.
And really, I'd say with all those, something to just keep in mind is it's all about the material,
Right.
right?
Totally.
Fit is completely up to you. How a sock fits, how a neck gaiter feels, how gloves feel. You don't want too much space, right?
Mhm.
But you also don't want something to always be too snug.
Right.
Now, socks generally you want them to be snug,
Yep.
right?
And wool.
Yes,
That is
Wool,
a hard
not
line.
cotton.
Yes.
Yes.
Wool socks.
Yes. So can you use the polyesters or the synthetic blends? Absolutely.
Right.
In fact, majority of socks you're going to find are going to have some sort of blend. However, merino wool is one of the best socks I've had. Have been our merino wool. I've even skied in your interview Sunday best type
Oh, yeah.
silk, or polyester silky material socks. I've skied in those in really hot conditions.
Mhm.
And the idea is that cotton as a fabric collects and traps moisture,
Mhm.
while the other materials will help wick sweat off of your foot. And that moisture is what really causes blistering,
Yep.
right? It's the friction and movement of that material along with the moisture as it kind of slides and moves, right? Those are the things that cause. Well, sorry, I kind of got this mixed up. Moisture is really the coldness factor,
Right.
while the friction is the blistering,
Yes.
right? But usually you'll find those two are usually coming hand in hand.
Yes.
So, which is why that kind of gets mixed up there.
Yeah. So, and one thing to keep in mind, some people are like, "Oh, I need 2 pairs of socks," or "I need a really thick pair." But ski boot technology's come a long way. It's designed to keep your foot warm. So trust your ski boot, wear a thin sock, be comfortable, and you'll have a great time.
Yep. Just don't wear multiple pairs.
Yes, please don't.
No cotton, only one pair of socks.
Yep.
And other than that, it's buyer's preference.
That's right. All right, so let's move to gloves.
Yeah.
My personal preference is mittens. I live for mittens. My hands never get cold. I don't usually have to wear a liner under my mittens, even on some of the coldest days, because my fingers are all sharing the warmth, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's better that you don't because it keeps your fingers close together.
Right. And then because I'm only holding on to my poles, right? I don't really need the ability of fingers. Some people really love them. I love my mittens. And then really when it comes down to gloves, Permaloft is really great. And that's just like the um, what's inside it,
Yep.
right?
Synthetic blend of
Yeah.
So it's basically like synthetic wool or cotton
Yeah.
or synthetic down.
Right. As an
Better.
insulator to help your hands stay warm. So my mittens look like boxing gloves, right? They're just like thick, waterproof gloves, and I love them.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. So.
Right. I tend to go a little more for the dexterity with gloves. I will say though, having skied cold days, I've wished I've had mittens many a times.
Yeah.
For a long time, I like the look and the feel, especially when gripping my pole, of having the dexterity of the glove. These are like my spring skiing gloves because they're a thinner material. And so I just like these ones a little better. They also have like the wrist strap, which is nice because in the spring it's so hot. I'm constantly removing my gloves.
Mhm.
I just get hot hands. You could ask my girlfriend, and she has cold hands, and I've always got hot hands. So it's like always trying to warm her up.
Wow.
So works
great.
well.
It's like a puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be a benefit to gloves, is if you do get hot hands really easily, you don't have to worry about like overly like sweating in your gloves a whole lot. But when it comes to warmth, mittens all the way.
Yep.
I like to have 2 pairs, 1 pair of gloves for spring skiing when it's a bit warmer, and 1 for the cold. And I usually use like a down or a Primaloft synthetic down, or even some people like heated gloves.
Yeah,
which are nice. But probably look for something on Amazon. I don't know. Some of the name brand heated gloves, they're supposed to be really warm, but they charge you a massive like surcharge in a way of you're spending like $300 to get these name branded heated gloves. And if it were me, I'd probably just buy on Amazon.
Yeah. My spring mittens are still mittens,
yeah,
kind of, but they look like this. They're like crab claws.
Oh yeah,
I love them.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's move to gaiters.
Yeah.
We'll kind of end there.
Yeah. I think that's a great spot.
Okay.
Right. Gaiters, and I guess like as we're saying, gaiters, any other type of accessories. There's a lot you can buy as far as accessories for boards. Boards and skis, like stomp pads are fun.
Yes.
Most of this other stuff, like wax add-ons to help with glide, they're very optional.
Yeah.
Right. They can be fun to use. Stomp pads, I would say, are pretty necessary for boards.
But with like a stomp pad, it is another way that you can express your style, right? Because there's a myriad of options when it comes to stomp pads.
Exactly. So. Right. But I would always recommend using some sort of neck gaiter or buff. Helps keep you warm, helps protect against wind resistance. Trent has an awesome recommendation when it comes to these.
I do, or at least I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
I like to use, I've used a lot of the black strap neck gaiters. I don't know if I have mine up here or not. I don't think so. But
it's like my extra one.
Yeah, looks basically like this. They're like tubes.
Yeah.
They're neck tubes, and you can stretch those over the back of your head to go underneath your helmet if you want to go full coverage and go up to the nose, or just underneath the nose or whatever, or you can keep them below the chin. They're really nice. They're comfortable. You can get thicker ones for thicker condition, or colder conditions, or thinner ones for lighter conditions. And so, yeah, they work great. I like to use, I'll tell you my method before Trent tells you why he uses his.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, these tubes, what happens is that one of the bigger complaints is they tend to get kind of stuck in your mouth, right? They collect moisture from your hot air and then they freeze from the cold air coming against you. Oftentimes, to avoid that, I will wear, if it's like a cold day outside, I will wear a wool neck gaiter to go over top of my regular one. So
Mhm.
that is kind of like the buffer against the cold air. And if it freezes, that part will freeze while the inner one will stay nice and clean. However, it's hard to get around the moisture around your face.
Yeah.
It's just going to be there with that kind of neck gaiter. So it's something you have to deal with
Yeah.
unless you go with a new solution.
This is what I use. And there's style points involved too. So this is called a schmog. Tom Cruise wears one to run through a desert storm.
Right?
And they're not super thick, but they're pretty big, right? So
Kind
I
of like a
usually,
scarf in a way.
yeah, it's just like a scarf. And right, like it's huge. And so you can fold it in a couple different ways. So depending on the conditions, I'll actually double or triple fold it. But what this allows is I'll fold it in half and then tie it like a bandana, tie it like a scarf underneath. Um, and it allows me to breathe out, right? The air is leaving, where in something like this, the air often feels like I'm choking, right? Because it doesn't let a ton of air out. This lets a lot of air out, but the air that comes in has to hit the barrier of it and then hit the second barrier. So the wind that's actually hitting my face is pretty minimal and it's not
Yeah.
super distracting. And I'm skiing up to like 60 miles an hour, right? And I prefer having this than something like that. And it's just because the airflow is so much better. On really cold days, it does freeze, but once again, it's like off my mouth because it's hanging off my nose. Um, and so when it freezes, I actually like it more because then it will just stick in place and it creates more of a wall for me. Everyone's a little different. That's what I love to use. A lot of people love the black straps. I just haven't gotten them to be very successful.
Yeah.
I've been skiing with something like this for like 10 years.
Yeah. And there's
So,
nothing wrong with playing around using combos. I
yeah.
mean, that's kind of what I found using the black straps is having that second barrier, like Trent's referencing, is nice. That people sell a lot of those wool neck gaiters, and they when they get wet, they freeze, which isn't fun. But having something like that can really help against that, or even using both. You know, if it's a cold day and you want to keep your ears and your neck warm, you can use the gaiter. You could use something like that, like a hood, to keep it warm, and then have to help protect against the other side. So,
Yeah, totally.
be creative.
Yes. And let us know what you prefer, right?
Yeah.
Let us know what kind of goggles you prefer. Let us know what kind of gaiters you prefer. If the scarf method sounds cool to you, what kind of helmets you like. We're very interested in what you guys like to use as well.
Yeah.
So,
All right, guys. With that, we're going to wrap up today. And really, I mean, almost a little premature, but we're coming close to it, to really wrapping up the season here. So we've hit all of the topics we want to talk about as far as gear. I would say we still often like to talk about the new gear coming out and adding in stuff about tuning. But also, as we're getting closer to summer, we'll start setting our sights on the summer sports and whatnot.
Yeah.
So please let us know if you have anything you would like us to talk about.
yeah.
If you want to hear more about ski gear and something in specific, if there was a favorite episode you had where we could revisit and give you more knowledge, or if you want to prep for next year, right? Trent and I are always looking for something to share.
Yep.
And even if you had something for summer stuff that you wanted to hear about, we'd be happy to look into that if we had some interest.
Yeah,
So
totally. So let us know. Once again, drop a like, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so that when we do come out with new videos, you're ready. You get notified. So,
right.
But thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. We'll catch you guys next time and journey with us further between two slopes.